morning. My name is Dean Ward, and I serve as the lead pastor of the River Church. And I am so grateful that you have chosen to join in with us here this morning. Now, you may be asking where here is, and perhaps you don't recognize it. We have filmed in this very spot sometime in the last year and a half. I am filming in the lobby of our new facility that we'll be moving into later this year. I don't know if I shared last week kind of the time frame that we're envisioning, but we are gearing up for our grand opening here at 273 Chester Drive to be on Sunday, September 15th. And yes, I do believe I mentioned that last week, and I promise I will be mentioning it every week between now and September 15th. So, if somebody asks you, when's your church moving? When are you going to get there? Just tell them our grand opening is September 15th. And we can't wait till you get to come and experience the river in our new location and hear the story and see all that God's been doing. Now, we are filming inside because a little over an hour ago, it rained like crazy. And we want to make sure we don't get rained out. But also, in filming inside in this space, the air conditioner's not hooked up yet. So I have my trusty red, white, and blue towel with me that I will be leaning into and using quite often. So let's jump right in. So have you ever noticed how our country is obsessed with youth? Have you ever noticed all the focus, effort, and energy in being young, looking young, dressing young? It's a fixation on youngness and youthfulness. My wife and I, every February through May, enjoy American Idol every year. We've really enjoyed it. But one of the things that's a little interesting about American Idol is if you are older than 29 years old, you can't apply, because it's not just American Idol, it's American Young Idol, because they don't want you if you're old. Now, make no mistake about it, Jason Bradley DeFord turned the music industry on its head with success late in his 30s. And you're like, oh, he must not have had too much success because I don't know who Jason Bradley DeFord is. Well, maybe you know him better as the now 39-year-old Jelly Roll. Yes, I love Jelly Roll and his enthusiasm for life and being a completely late bloomer in the music industry. Nobody really ever has success that late in life. Well, I want to let you know, even with our fascination with youth and youthfulness, a 2022 Facebook post has people reconsidering this, stating that, quote, the most productive age of a person is from 60 to 70. That decade of life in the 60s, this post declared, is the most productive decade of life. Then it says, the second most productive human stage is the age from 70 to 80 years old. Your 70s is the second most productive decade in your life. And that the third most productive time in your life is between the ages of 50 and 60. Before that, the person was said to have not reached their peak. Therefore, if you are nearing your 60s, 70s, or 80s, you are at the best level of life. Now, this post claimed, based on a New England Journal of Medicine study. And so ever since I heard this a week and a half ago, I have been dreaming of the possibilities in my 60s and 70s and, feeling like, man, I haven't even hit my stride yet at 57. I got, this is my third most productive decade, the study found. And I can't wait till I get to my 70s and 60s and can't wait to see all that God wants to do in and through me. And I was pumped, looking forward to this, looking forward to preaching about it, talking about it, pumping us up about it. And then I started working on the sermon, and I decided to just get real clear on who made this statement and where this came from. And I searched the information and found my hopes completely dashed when I found out that Snopes.com, that this study reportedly in the New England Journal of Medicine isn't true at all. There was no study doing this. Somebody completely fabricated this post that I was going to launch my sermon with. This post that I've been having so much joy and excitement and hope for my 60s and 70s all came crashing down to find out that this study was in fact not true. Well, today we are going to jump into part 2 of our sermon series, just simply called Go River Church. And we are looking at our transition and calling from our current location to this new location and all the opportunity that it affords us. And today's sermon is just simply called Give Me the Hill Country. Inspiration at 85. So today I want to tell you, share with us together the story of a man in Scripture named Caleb. Now Caleb, he was a man of God that had deep faith and confidence in God, and he was a contemporary of Joshua. And you know how the story went. That the Lord, through the leadership of Moses, took Joshua and Caleb and sent 10 other people on a mission to infiltrate the promised land, the land the Lord was going to give the children of Israel for 40 days. And so these 12 spies, as they were, went into the promised land. And they scoped everything out. And they were overwhelmed at how beautiful it was, how lush it was, how the produce that it produced, there you go, was just amazing. They couldn't believe that this was the property, this was the land that the Lord was going to give them. But one other thing that most of them noticed was that the people that inhabited the land looked like giants to them. They looked to be of physical stature much bigger than they were. And they were so overwhelmed by this that they described themselves as looking like grasshoppers in the eyes of the inhabitants of this promised land. And so they came back to Moses and reported. Joshua and Caleb said, let's go. Let's do this. God has promised us this land. This land is amazing. You can't believe what this land is like. Let's go inhabit the land that the Lord our God has promised us. And the other 10 people on this mission for 40 days said, no, we can't do it. They're monsters in our sight. They will squish us and squash us and stomp us out like grasshoppers. We don't have a chance. And Joshua and Caleb are trying to prevail over the other 10, saying, no, that's not what's happening. Caleb was 40 years old at this time, in the prime of his life. And these 10 stirred up such dissension in the children of Israel that the whole nation was filled with fear, apart from Joshua and apart from Caleb and Moses. And they crumbled under the report and the fear that they would not be able to enter the land that God promised them without being destroyed. And they turned the whole nation against trusting God, that God would do this. And so God was fed up. He wanted to wipe them off the face of the earth, and Moses interceded and said, no, don't destroy your people, because then the Egyptians will really have something to say about you. Don't do that. And so God relented, didn't destroy the people, but he did say this: 1 year for every day that my group of 12 people I sent into the promised land, 1 year for every day, for 40 years, you're going to have to wander around in this wilderness, and you won't enter into the promised land until every single person 40 years old and older has died, except for Joshua and Caleb. So, this is where the story today begins. In Joshua chapter 14, they have served their time. They are now ready to go into the promised land and inhabit the land that the Lord had promised them. Only problem is now Caleb's in his mid-80s. And I want to read to you the account in Joshua chapter 14 of Caleb and his attitude at this opportunity. Verse 1 says, "Now these are the areas the Israelites received as an inheritance in the land of Canaan." Verse 6, "Caleb said to him," meaning Joshua, "You know what the Lord said to Moses about you and me. I was 40 years old when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me to explore the land. And I brought him back a report according to my convictions. But my fellow Israelites who went up with me made the hearts of the people melt in fear. I, however, followed the Lord my God wholeheartedly. So on that day, Moses swore to me, 'The land on which your feet have walked will be your inheritance and that of your children forever, because you have followed the Lord my God wholeheartedly.'" Verse 10, "Now then, just as the Lord promised, he has kept me alive 45 years since the time he said this to me, while Israel moved about in the wilderness. So here I am today, 85 years old. I am still as strong today as the day Moses sent me out. I am just as vigorous to go out into the battle now as I was then." Now listen to this. "Now give me this hill country that the Lord promised me that day. You yourself heard then that the Anakites were there, and their cities were large and fortified. But the Lord helping me, I will drive them out just as he said." Then Joshua blessed Caleb and gave him Hebron as his inheritance. So Hebron has belonged to Caleb ever since, because he followed the Lord, the God of Israel, wholeheartedly. Now, when I'm visioning Caleb at 85 years old, all gung-ho, all ready to go, all passionate about acquiring what God had promised to give him, about realizing this success that was coming his way, I envision an older Jack LaLanne. You know, he would wear his Jack LaLanne, something like that. He would wear his one-piece jumpsuit, and he would advertise juicers and chiropractic care, and he was just kind of a health guru until the very end. Here's an image that you can kind of get who we're talking about. Well, I envision that Caleb kind of had that same energy and passion at 85. Now, the difference between Caleb and the 10 is where they place their trust. The 10, they didn't place their trust in God. They placed their trust in their own thoughts about their own physical abilities and inabilities. But God had called them to something bigger than they could ever imagine. And because they didn't trust God, they didn't get to experience, because they didn't trust God and they convinced everybody else not to trust God, they didn't get to experience the amazing blessing that the Lord had in store for them. What has the Lord called you to in this decade of your life? Perhaps you're further along in age than in your 40s. Perhaps you're like me in your 50s, 60s, 70s, or 80s, and you're like, I can't see anything good ahead. I'm just looking at my past, and nothing good has happened in my past, and nothing good is going to happen in my future. I want to invite you to reimagine your journey of trusting God, that He actually might have something amazing for you. We've been very open with you about our journey to this location and how I'll just speak for myself, I didn't think this is what God had in store for us. But the Lord continued to reveal His faithfulness and trustworthiness and His plan. And now regularly at our house, Leslie and I will be talking, and she's like, can you believe we get to do this? I am so pumped about the future of the river, more than I've been in a long time. I can't wait to see all that's ahead for us. We, even in our 50s, believe it or not, are up for this journey and can't wait to see what's ahead because we trust God. Hey, I want to give you a moment just to engage with this video, encouraging us in our journey to trust and trust wholeheartedly. Let's enjoy this video together.
I saw His sign. I heard His voice. I followed the path. Did not know where I was going or even what I would find. Got lost. I got lost in showing and proving to people I had faith. Saying I believed in God, but I really was performing for man. Having a form of godliness, but denying the power of His holiness. I surrendered my heart, laid down my pride. In His grace, I found a new start. And with His strength, I now abide. Through the valleys and the peaks, His guidance I sought. In moments of weakness, His battles I fought. My journey was rugged, with trials untold. But in every step, His mercies unfold. I learned to listen. And that was hard. Not to speak. To seek His wisdom when I was feeling weak. In silence, I found His comforting hand, guiding me gently to the promised land. No longer for show. My faith, it became real. In His presence, my brokenness began to heal. See, He became my shelter, my fortress, my shield. In His unchanging love, my spirit was sealed. Some trust in horses, some trust in man. But I will trust in the name of the Lord. This is my victorious tale.
I hope that video encouraged you. And it's my hope in your journey with God that every day you will decide to take that next step of trusting His will, trusting His leading, trusting His calling on your life, trusting the way He's describing and showing you the blessing that He wants you to be. It's all about trust. Last week I spoke about finishing well. And as I have reflected on that more this week as well, to be honest, so many people in their 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s, they just cash it in. They're like, I'm done. I'm hanging it up. I got nothing more to give. I'm worn out, tired. I'm going to sit on the sidelines. And if that is your posture, you are going to miss out on so much that the Lord has in store for you, because He has great plans for you, regardless of the decade that you are in your life. I want to finish well. I was listening to somebody describe their desire to finish well, and they said it this way, and I thought, ooh, that's going to be my new mantra. I want to get all the way to the finish line, not failing because of sin, not failing because of disobedience, and not failing because I didn't take care of myself. Now, I want to tell you in the last part of this message, or the second part of this message, about 4 church leaders and pastors in my life. Okay? So I'm going to talk about 4 church leaders and pastors in my life. The first is Lowell Martin, Pastor Lowell Martin. You may not know that name, but he was the first most influential pastor in my life when, as a young boy, we attended the chapel out in Spring Church, PA, a little small church. And he, as a pastor, signed my first Bible, and on the front page, he said something to the effect that I look forward to what your life becomes as you follow God's will into ministry. And his influence in my life, just as a 7, 8, 9-year-old little guy, was strong and profound. 2 other pastors that some of us may be aware of, they were a really big deal in the 60s, 70s, 80s. Some of us won't be familiar with them. It's the father and son pastor team of Jack and Dave Hiles. I had never heard anybody preach with as much conviction and passion as both Jack the father and Dave the son Hiles. They moved me. They created passion and desire to follow God wholeheartedly and go all in with my faith, and to cut out any of the foolishness in my life and to pursue God wholeheartedly. They had a profound impact. They pastored First Baptist Church in Hammond, Indiana. A third pastor that I would like to introduce you to, because I've grouped Jack and Dave, father and son, as one pastor group, but a third pastor I'd like to describe to you is Pastor Rich Krasnarek. Now, if you grew up in the Greensburg, Delmont area in the 70s and 80s, you would have been familiar with Pastor Rich. He was the teacher and church planter in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. He was the main teaching pastor at Christian Fellowship Center and the church planting pastor at Cornerstone Ministries, one of the most influential ministries in all of Westmoreland County. And then finally, you've heard me speak of him before and probably have read his books, Bill Hybels. He was the founding pastor of Willow Creek Community Church in South Barrington, Illinois, and he was a leader of leaders and taught leadership in profound ways And he led at Willow Creek Community Church in the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, and 2010s. These 4 pastors had a profound influence in my life. Lowell Martin, Rich Krasnerick, and Bill Hybels all personally engaged and interacted with me and formed and shaped me in significant ways. Jack and Dave, just from a distance through listening to them preach and teach. So what did they all have in common? Well, the first thing I mentioned is all 4 of them had a profound influence in my life. And the other heartbreaking thing they had in common is that none of them finished well. None of them finished well. 3 of the 4 stories have been well documented by journalists and in the papers over the years. And they didn't finish well. And to be honest, it's part of what kept me from being a pastor, wanting to be a pastor, was that I was terrified that this was just an occupational hazard and what's in store for every pastor. And I didn't want to not finish well. Well, I am paying attention to my life. And I'm highly committed as your pastor to living my life in such a way that I finish well. I am highly committed to make sure that the life I am inviting you to live is the life that I am living and that they are congruent. I don't preach on things that I am not doing my best to follow Christ in those areas either. And so I want to make sure that the label of hypocrite doesn't find its way to me. I want to make sure that I finish well. I want to make sure that my wife and my relationship is strong and grounded and withstands anything that the evil one throws our way. I want to make sure that I end my life and ministry with a bigger heart toward God and a bigger heart toward others. This is my goal. So if you are as highly committed to finishing your life well as a follower of Christ, you're calling well, whether you're in occupational ministry or you minister every day of your life at your workplace, in your home, or in your neighborhood, I want to introduce you to a few heroes that I know that are finishing well. Many of you, if you've been at the river for any length of time, would be familiar with Doug and Carol Hetrick. Yes, they are my in-laws, and to be honest, I think I did win the in-law lottery. I got 2 really great in-laws. When they were in their 60s and we started the river, they said, kind of like Caleb, give me the hill country. You know what they said? We want the nursery. We want to head up and lead the nursery. And for just about 5 years, they oversaw our nursery ministry and made such a great impact on those young infants and their families. I have a friend that knows Doug and Carol well, and she says often, Carol is my hero. I want to finish like her. I want to have a great attitude like her. I want to love God like her. I want to love my family like her. I want to love others like her. I want to send cards of encouragement. I want to bless and help others. I want to pray for others. She looks at my mother-in-law and says, she is by far and away my hero that I want to be like in my 70s and 80s. Doug has a zest for life, a youthful excitement about all the new things that are happening and going on, a deep sense of gratitude for all that he has experienced in his life. They are poised and they are finishing well, even in their later 80s. If you've been around the river, you may know Vince and Joy. They live up to her name. They are a couple that are filled with joy, and they're experiencing significant physical challenges now. And I call them every week and just check in with them. And even in the midst of the pain that is fairly regular to them, they are filled with joy and love and grace. So, the reality is, as the river, a great group in their 70s and 80s have now joined us in this new adventure, and they've committed to being part of this adventure together, and they have so much to offer. So I want to invite you to lean into them, to get to know them, to build relationships with them. Their names, I'll just give you their first names, are Karen, Adita, Cindy, Vi, also known as Chubb, and her husband, Doc. Ken, Jerry and Bob, Gail, Alan, Joyce, Gerda, Sharon, Mary Jane, Lorraine. We have been blessed with some spectacular people in their 70s and 80s that have joined us, who have declared, our journey is not over yet. We're not cashing it in. We're uniting together with the river to see all that God has in store for us, and we can't wait to see. They offer wisdom, love. They model for us what it looks like to trust God wholeheartedly. They live with joy. They demonstrate a life filled with hope. They pray. Oh, do they pray. And they have some great advice if we will listen and hear it. So I just want to wrap this up and make sure that we're fully embracing the reality that God is not done with us until the end, regardless of your decade. So if you're in your 20s, I want to invite you to head into your 20s with eyes wide open, even in the midst of trying to figure out how to be an adult in today's world and love God fully. I want to invite you to embrace your 20s with anticipation and trust. Or possibly you're in your 30s and getting your legs under you and finding your rhythm, possibly as a parent or a spouse, finding your way in your career if you are working outside the home and you are finding that you have skills that can make a difference. I personally felt like my 40s up until my 50s were my best decade in life. I loved my 40s because by then I actually had learned a few things and I had actually honed my skills and was able to accomplish things that I wasn't able to in my 20s and 30s. I loved my 40s. Or perhaps you're in your 50s and things are falling into place and you find that you have margin and God's blessing in your life that you had never anticipated or seen before. I want to invite you, don't limit God with what and when He wants to accomplish in and through you. Don't limit God. Live with the type of confidence in God that Caleb had when he said, "Give me the hill country, because I have much more to accomplish, even at 85. I want to invite you to just take some time this week and look at your attitude toward where you are in life and begin to dream, begin to hope, begin to look for what God might have in store for you in the future, especially as we as a church move into our new location on September 15th. Now, here's your homework. Get ready for next week's sermon. And I want to invite you to begin to imagine who you want to see here, who you want to have become part of what God is doing at the river 15068. I want you to put a list together and begin to pray for the people that God might be wanting to bring here through you. God bless you guys. Thank you for joining in with us, and I can't wait till we get to explore all of that next Sunday. Have a great week, everybody.